Hello, my loves. It's Danielle Mercurio, and welcome to season 6 of the show. 6 to me is a very powerful number. It gets a lot of different viewpoints or interpretations. However, I like to look at the 6 as growth, as something coming into fruition, as fertility. Because if we look at the number 6, we really focus on the rounding of the bottom half of the number. We have a beautiful pregnant being, someone that is growing something, someone that is cultivating, someone that is preparing to birth life out into the world. And that's the season that I'm in my life. And I couldn't think of a more perfect number to represent this new season of the podcast.
Danielle Mercurio. It's time for the show with Danielle. Welcome to the show. Danielle Mercurio. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
All right, my loves, I want to use this episode to bring you up to speed as to where I am in my life and trusting that as I share my story, it will resonate with you in a way that you can weave it into your own story. I want to talk a little bit around this idea of consistency, of showing up for your life, for your industry, and what to do when you get into a rut, when it comes to your passions, when it comes to the ways that you're showing up, when it feels like you're not choosing yourself and the world is somehow choosing you. Let me just adjust my volume a little bit. Let's see. Oh, I like it this way. Ooh. I actually, speaking of consistency, this podcast has had its ebbs and flows, that's for sure, if you've been following along since the beginning. Name changes, seasons reaching their peak and then falling. And this past season, season 5, I was kind of winging it, to be honest, and wasn't quite using the proper equipment. I did have an amazing editor who edited all of our guest episodes. However, that being said, I wasn't using my mics. I literally have 2 microphones. I have all of the equipment that you need, and I wasn't letting myself get into the space to figure it out. And so I spent this morning by myself on my own figuring it out. And it wasn't that complicated. It didn't take that long. I just had to make the time for myself. And that's been a big thing that I have been aware of as we've entered into this fall season. The end of summer was really rough for me. I felt really distraught, really torn. It felt like a culmination of the past couple of years finally coming to a head. I'm the type of person, when I'm going through something, I tend to stretch it out. And I stretch it out because I don't make the proper time for it because I'm scared of what that could represent. If I make the time for it, will I fall into lack? If I make the time for it, will it unravel into more chaos and drama and hurt? And instead, I coast through it. But coasting through it also creates confusion and lack and stagnancy and in and out bouts of depression. And I finally got to a point, I'm already getting emotional, at the end of the summer, right at the tail end of Virgo season, where I was like, enough is enough. I am ready to fully show up for the things that I haven't been willing to look at. I'm finally ready to take a stand and be who I'm meant to be and not dance around it. I'm finally ready to be available for what I'm here for and not just ride out what is kind of working. Because guess what? Eventually, anything in your life that you're coasting, that you're winging, now, don't get me wrong, life should be a little messy, right? It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. Not everything has to be in alignment in order to prosper. However, there's a difference between being a little bit messy and being on track and coasting and being all over the place and taking shortcuts and relying on your gifts to make it work in the moment, which is what I do. But then everything else kind of falls through the cracks. And that can only support you for so long. If lots of things are falling through the cracks, eventually it's going to fill your entire foundation. You're going to find your entire foundation is shot, is tired, can't support you, can't hold you. And that's what I was witnessing at the end of Virgo season. And I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I am going to do some ground control. I'm going to get under the hood, under the foundation, clear out the roots that are rock hard. You know, when you see a root and it's just dried up and shriveled, a juicy, nice root should be. I'm also have been heavily getting into herbalism. A nice, juicy root should be a little spongy. It should feel like it's moist. It should feel like it's still got roots. It's still got life to give. So much to live for. If you were to break open that root, you would get its essence, a little bit of aroma, a little bit of its flavor. And so I went down under my foundation and I started pulling the roots that were rock hard, dried up, couldn't contain me anymore. I started clearing away things that have been distracting me. I get very distracted by my phone. I grew up with ADHD or ADD rather. I didn't have the hyper part. I have the hyper part sometimes when it comes to an anxious attachment style. I notice that's where I get hyper. If my anxious attachment style is triggered, then I get into hyper mode. But otherwise, I'm pretty much just your plain old ADD, which is just your classic daydreamer, can get lost in her own thoughts, down rabbit holes, whatever it may be. And I noticed I was spending a lot of time on my phone. Everything felt productive on my phone because it would always be doing things that were within the realm of how I show up in the world, or talking with friends, or engaging with clients, whatever it may be. But I realized that I didn't have great, what's the word I want to use? Great time management around it, if you will, or great boundaries. That's a better word. Boundaries around what I'm available for. And so I started to look at that as well. I started putting my phone down more. I started actually taking my screen time seriously. I put my phone on do not disturb. Things like that. I started to realize that if I was always picking up my phone, I wasn't going to be picking myself up and out of this funk that I've been in. And so getting out of the funk was hard work, and I'm still in it, but I'm definitely on the other side of it. Something definitely clicked right around right after the new moon in Libra. And I feel like the new moon in Libra was significant for me because it makes an aspect to my Saturn, which is all about rules, discipline. How are you showing up? So this Libra season is like, all right, Danielle, let's get it together. It's fall. It's going to be winter. You're going to be in more darkness. It's only going to get worse. So how are you going to lift yourself up? Right. And I have my support team that I turn to, but sometimes even your support team can only take you so far. And eventually you have to be your own support system. You have to be your own team. You have to be your own person that's going to rally for you. And really, while you're cleaning up that foundation, while you're looking at all of the shortcuts and ways that you are allowing things to fall through, you start to lean more into what you are capable of. One of the things that I've been reminded of lately is my potential, what I'm here for. If you've been following me for a while, you've probably recognized, and maybe you haven't recognized, but I'm going to ask you to recognize it. I've had a lot of moments of being the rising star. That triple Leo, here for it. I have been around a lot of players in this industry, coaching, spirituality, whatever it will be. I used to work for Gabby Bernstein. I've been around a lot of the top players. I naturally seem to attract that. Still to this day, I pull in very high level clients. And I recognize that in myself because of what I have to offer, because of what I have to share, because of my gifts. However, once again, that will only take me so far if the foundation isn't set. And I realized that why the foundation wasn't set for me was because of old wounds that had been activated over the past couple of years. And some of those old wounds had to deal with my heartbreak of being behind the scenes in the coaching industry and being around a lot of high level people in the spiritual industry. Seeing what they were like behind the scenes was not pretty, was not fruitful, did not feel good. The idea of taking advantage of people financially, energetically, emotionally didn't feel so great. Seeing what was happening in the space of diversity and inclusion did not feel so hot. And so the more that I was seeing that, instead of doing something about it, which I was doing something about it, but I was playing small. And I was like, okay, everyone, here are the rules. This is how we treat people, okay? And I'm going to play small with you while we do that. I'm going to make sure that no one puts the target on me. I'm going to make sure that I don't take advantage of anybody, that I don't, make anyone feel less than. And instead of just trusting myself and trusting that I'm in integrity as best I can, and I'm always learning and evolving, and I'm here for people as best I can be, I decided the solution was to play small. And that solution to play small came from a smaller part of me in my upbringing. It activated older wounds that I thought I had taken care of when I had my spiritual awakening during my Saturn return in my late 20s. These were all realizations I had. But as I started to get deeper into the work that I do and how I show up, guess what? Boom, triggered. And I started to get pulled away. And I started to get pulled away from my mission. I started to get pulled away from my why. And so I continue to show up by the grace of God because I am so good at what I do in the moment, but everything else has been leaky. And the leaks, the cracks, have been statements that I've heard growing up and even in my early adulthood when I went through traumatic situations. Don't make it into a big deal. You're just exaggerating. Take what you can get. Be grateful for what you have. Isn't that enough? What you want more? Those statements, those thoughts, those ideas started flooding through me as a coach, as a spiritual teacher, as a leader, as a host of this podcast. And if you hear those voices enough, they start to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So my mission is to meet you where you're at and help you show up for your own self, to awaken into your soul. And my hope is that by awakening into your own soul, you can have a ripple effect on others. You can give back. I don't believe, that we have to be self-absorbed to make that happen, right? And I also was witnessing that too. A lot of spiritual bypassing, a lot of people, looking at world events and saying, oh, well, this is just to wake us up. This is just to bring in more light. I think that's kind of bullshit, to be honest. And I think that's a self-absorbed approach to spirituality. Yes, you need to be a little bit selfish, but that selfishness is just so that you finally get out of your own way. So you finally create space to finally rally for yourself so that then you can rally for others. That is so, 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 so important. However, if you minimize that, then you'll never really get ahead. And I really started to realize at the end of this fall, and I've been running from it, really. I've been running from really showing up for myself because I was too scared of what people might think of me. And I'm going to be completely honest about that. I was so scared of what people might think of me if I was in my greatness. I decided to not be that great or kind of great or great in small incubators, like with my one-on-one clients, in a retreat, in a small yoga classroom. When really what I'm made for, what my heart is capable of, is the big rooms, the masses. And I'm not downplaying the small rooms because I love them too. It's just if I had to pick, if the universe was like, Danielle, do you want this stadium of 500 people or do you want this room of 5? I want the stadium of 500 people. I can show up for those 5 people and I will, but I want the stadium of 500. And it's about time that I'm open and honest about that and don't feel guilty about it. We can't feel guilty about what we're meant to do. There's this idea of a guilty pleasure. Fuck that. Let it be a pleasure. Oh, it's my guilty pleasure. Is it? Why are you feeling guilty about something that's a pleasure for you? Stop. Let it be pleasurable. Let it feel good. And realize that guilt has nothing to do with it. Okay? And so what I'm morphing back into is allowing myself to be back on that track of the rising star and trusting that I'm allowed to do that. Not only am I allowed to do that, I'm supposed to do that. So where in your life, when you think about your why and you think about where you are called to be, how you are being led, Where are you allowing that choice to blossom? Where are you picking that room? Or where are you settling for the smaller ones? And again, I don't want to downplay smaller rooms. And especially when you're first starting out, whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're starting out in an entry level job, there is a time and a place to get your bearings, to get your footing. But eventually you've got to get promoted. Eventually more people need to show up. That's just how it goes. That's growth. That's evolution. And we can't keep denying our evolution, because when we deny our evolution, we get confused, we get stagnant, we go into lack, we go into chasing mode, we give away our power. We think that we have to work harder, we take shortcuts, we procrastinate. There's a lot of things that happen when we deny our evolution. And further, when we deny our trauma. So, over the past few years with COVID and different themes that have been coming up in the world, I downplayed my situation. I didn't want to make a big deal out of the fact that it was scary and lonely to be single in a city that I didn't have access to, that was very much in lockdown. I couldn't speak anymore. I couldn't put myself out there in the public. That's when things really started to get shaky for me. I was spending so much time alone, and I didn't feel useful. I didn't feel necessary. I didn't feel needed. And so eventually I left my home in Philly, and I allowed myself to be on the road to reconnect with the sense of home from within. And that was really helpful, to start to reconnect to my own narrative. But let me tell you, that takes a long time to rectify. I've been in my current home in Greenville, South Carolina for a year now. And just now am I feeling like I've shed the grief and the traumatic circumstances that surrounded me during COVID. And again, I'm not going to compare myself to anybody else, or I could sit in my ego or my trauma self that said don't make it into a big deal would say, oh, but people had it worse. Yes, some people had it better, and some people had it just the same as me. What about us? What about the person that's had the same situation as you? So this is for anyone that resonates. And if it doesn't resonate, if you're like, Danielle, I had it so much harder, I can't listen. Okay. That's okay. And I'm here for you. And I see you in that. And I recognize that. We are all on our journey in our own way. However, I do believe that at the end of the day, suffering is suffering, pain is pain, tears are tears. And you can't say my tears are stronger than yours, or my tears mean more than yours. There's a reason why they came out of your being, why they were released. Let's honor each other's tears. Let's honor each other's sorrows. Let's honor each other's struggles. Because that is a perspective of growth that is going to move us forward. I very much believe in the Aquarian age, and the Aquarian age, which started about a decade ago, is bringing forth this idea of the new age, which is we must be different or unique to make a difference. And if we continue to stay in our old programming, especially programming for many of us that came when we were born under the Piscean age. So the Piscean age started around the time of Jesus, and it's been with us for over 2,000 years. So our parents were born in the Piscean age, our grandparents and their grandparents and so forth, all born within the Piscean age, which was downplay, don't make a big deal. See what your preacher has to say. See what your teacher has to say. See what your president has to say. See what your mentor has to say. It was always like, just stay quiet and do what you're told. And now for those of us that are here and transitioning into the Aquarian age, it's not be quiet and do what you're told. It's be quiet enough to go within and then activate that voice out into the world. Be quiet enough to be in the stillness of your soul, to understand why you're here, to recognize your brilliance, to understand how you might have to do things a little bit different to make a difference in the world. It takes courage to move into that space. But once we do, once we start to give ourselves a chance, once we start to recognize if we don't choose ourselves, the world will choose for you. that evokes a shift. And for me, I couldn't keep denying the way I've been posting. I have been showing up and making impact and helping. I am not downplaying that. I am not denying the good work I've done over the past couple years. But what I am being honest about, I'm recognizing is where I stunted myself at the same time, where I was afraid of my growth, where I was afraid I wouldn't be taken care of if I went bigger, where I was afraid that I would be made fun of or attacked for talking openly about the things that I felt like I needed to talk about. And it has nothing to do with anybody in my current reality. It has everything to do with the statements that I allowed myself to carry from growing up and my early to mid 20s. Don't make it into a big deal. You're exaggerating. Take what you can get. But I'm telling you, once you give yourself a chance, which takes courage and dedication and devotion, it unlocks you into a flow. And that flow brings you clarity. And that clarity essentially is your why. So often I work with individuals, and the first thing that they want to know is, what am I supposed to be doing? Who am I supposed to be with? Where am I supposed to live? What should I be doing? Okay? Who am I supposed to be with? What should I be doing? Where should I live? How should I do it? Those are the biggest questions I get asked. And it is an honor and a gift to be able to show up for you as an intuitive, as a coach, as an astrologer to help you with those things. However, all of those things fall into place once you know your why. We're taught growing up who, what, where, when, why. Why is last. No. Why is not last. Why is first. Once you know your why, the who, what, where, when, how comes together. Who, what, where, when, how comes together once you know your why. But if you're trying to figure out who, what, where, when, how now, before the why, you are going to feel lost. You are going to be running in circles. You are going to feel stagnant. You are going to get tired. You are going to take shortcuts. You are going to copy other people. You are going to give away your power. Create your why and you create flow. Access boundaries around it, and you will be amazed what's able to take off. That's what starts to seal your foundation. That's what starts to reactivate it, the ground that's been supporting you. That's what begins to seal up the cracks. I was watching last night, and trigger warning for anyone before you watch this. It's on Netflix with Mila Kunis. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right. I didn't look it up ahead of time, to be honest. She's in a Netflix movie called The Luckiest Girl Alive. And I saw previews for it last week. And I was kind of like, I don't know if that's something I really want to watch. It looks kind of fluffy, I thought. I thought it was like fluffy, like girl that grew up like poor in a small town makes it big in New York City. And I'm like, I don't really need to see that story. But then it came up on my previews again. And it was a different preview than the first one I saw. And there was something about it that got my attention. I think she was lying about something. And I was like, whoa, lying. Ooh, I'm into this. And then I started to watch it. And I started to see how her trauma, and I don't want to go too much into it, but there was sexual trauma, how her trauma made her believe that she had to lie and manipulate in order to gain success and love in her life. And that really resonated with me because that's how I showed up in my adulthood when I was first entering into it, living in Philly, even when I lived in New York a little bit. There was a part of me that felt ashamed. There was a part of me that felt like I wasn't good enough. And a lot of it was because of my own trauma. My trauma that was around having body dysmorphia, being immersed in diet culture from an early age, battling with my weight on and off, being sexually assaulted multiple times, and every time thinking it was my fault. It was my problem. I thought all of these things were because I wasn't good enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't resourceful enough. There was something about me that was wrong, that was broken. And that's why I kept attracting it all. That's what I believed. And luckily, it wasn't until my Saturn return, where I started getting help, that I started to recognize that it wasn't my fault, that I was a victim of diet culture, that I was not supposed to be subjected to someone doing something to my body if I didn't give consent. There were a lot of things I didn't know. I was so ignorant to my trauma. And luckily, when Me Too came to be in 2016, that also helped bring me greater awareness around my own trauma in being assaulted. And I can feel safe in my body now. I will say, no matter what, over these past few years, the one thing that has continued to show up for me and support me and carry me is my body. Now, my body has gotten sick over the past couple of years, and we'll talk more about that in another episode. I actually want to talk about what happens when you're going through spiritual ascension and expansion and other things in your body. Kind of how does your body go along for the ride? However, as far as my boundaries with who I am and how I'm showing up sexually with a person, around what it is that I'm eating, around my body dysmorphia, that has been clean and really, really in a great space. However, I did feel weird about that too. Like, am I allowed to talk about my body? Because now if you look at me, I appear thin, yet I spent 15 years of my life being the one that was the chubby one. So it's like, who am I to talk about what it's like to be chubby if I'm not chubby now, right? Who am I to talk about diet culture if I'm not slamming it or a victim of it? So um, personally, me and my body have been on board as best we can, but I feel like there was definitely moments also where I didn't fully, or I haven't fully talked about how I take care of my body, and I think that's why it was feeling the ways that it did sometimes. And again, we'll talk about that in another episode, how I've moved through my relationship with my body so that it's in the best state that it can be. That being said, I was watching the movie, backtrack back to the movie, and by the end, I was sobbing because, spoiler alert, she winds up sharing her story. And when she shares her story, when she finally realizes it wasn't my fault, so many other people could step up and say, shit, it wasn't my fault either. I have been hiding this for so long. And I'm telling you, when we hide things, they go into that foundation. They go into what is supporting us. And so when there are things that you're hiding, ignorant around, lying about, manipulating, it creates a really unstable foundation. And so that's why it's so important that we share our truth, no matter what we look like, no matter what our status is, what our privilege may be, what our resources are, what our intelligence is. You share. You share because you care. And from that place of sharing, your foundation gets stronger. You become more stable. And it really reminded me of the journey that I've been through in not feeling ashamed of my past trauma. While there's still those voices that run through that I'm working through around, don't make it into a big deal. You're exaggerating. People are going to judge you. The people that are going to judge me, I don't want near me. I have a boundary around. They're not my ideal client. Why do I want to work with someone that's judging me? And so I'm okay to filter that out. I'm okay in believing that I'm a good person with a good heart. And I'm more than okay believing that so are you. You are a good person with a good heart that is doing your best, that wants to make a difference in the world, that wants to continue to connect to your why, your uniqueness, and wants to trust that you will be supported and taken care of as you go. And you are the type of person that understands when you don't choose for yourself, others will choose for you. And so as I move into this new season with you, there's going to be a lot of solo episodes to start off because there's a lot of topics I want to talk about. And I feel ready and excited and accountable I have accountability built in to do it as well, so that I can consistently show up for you, which is really me consistently showing up for myself, not denying what I'm here to do, not constantly running into that fear of taking advantage of people. Just because I'm unfortunately in an industry that is disruptive and has hurt people and created harm, I'm just as equally in an industry that has created a lot of hope, a lot of awareness, a lot of growth, a lot of life changing action. And I'm choosing to lean into that. I'm choosing to be on that side of it. I'm choosing to not bypass but have fun with my spirituality. I'm choosing to be open around my blocks and what's holding me back. I'm choosing not to give away my power. I'm choosing not to chase things because I'm out of alignment with my faith. I am choosing to show up clear headed and clear minded. I am choosing to show up with an open heart. And I am choosing to believe that is the best that I can do. And I am supported from that. I have so much to offer that I have been denying you. And for that, I apologize. I do. I apologize if I ever trailed off when you were really hooked in. I apologize if there was a moment where you thought, wow, it would be so cool if Danielle did this because you were tapping into something and I didn't do it. And it doesn't mean that I'm supposed to now show up for you 24/7, but there's a more efficient way. And I know that because I was doing that. And then life got hard, it caught up to me, and I let it go away. And I'm so grateful and appreciative of what I do have now, what I have amassed, because that's also been exactly the way that it's supposed to be. The clients that have entered my life have also helped me. The opportunities that I've had, even though they haven't been 100% in alignment with what I may want, have also been so perfect and timely, if that makes sense. You can be grateful for everything you have and still want more. And I was denying that latter part. I was very much, and I very much have been in the past couple of years, in the span of doing this full time. I have been so grateful for everything and everyone that has shown up for me, that I have paid my bills every single month, that I have more than enough. Yet there's still more, and that's not coming from greed. It's not coming from need. It is truly coming from who I am. It is truly coming from the depths of my soul. And so I share this with you in the hopes that it might relight a fire that has slowly been burning out within you, that you still take opportunities to rest. And being more available for me doesn't mean hustling more, doesn't mean working harder. It means being more deliberate around how I show up, being more available in ways that are more expansive, not taking shortcuts, but recognizing where my investments can lead me in the long run, not fixating on what's going wrong in my industry, but showcasing what is so right. That's where I am. And if you're with me, I'm with you, and we're in this together. I love you. Share this out to anyone that may need it, that may resonate, and let's keep this show flowing. Oh my goodness, we're at 33 minutes. Of course we are.